it plausible to say that if Democrats had done this when Republicans were in charge, that this would be how it would be handled?
Sure. This is called politics. So the first thing is,
Okay,
let's admit the obvious.
Yeah.
A mistake was made. Who made the mistake? Well, the person who started the text chat. So Mike Waltz has some responsibility. I think Mike Waltz is a high-quality individual. His experience in the national security community it predates the Trump administration, dates back more than 25 years. But a mistake was made. The additional mistake was the person who contributed the more sensitive information. So when we say all things are equal here, and by even having Signal on your phone, you should basically be put under the prison, is like a little out of hand, okay? Whether it's a Republican or Democrat. Easy for me because it's a Republican saying this about a Republican, though. So, but admit the obvious and then move forward and say how things will change. That is the normative thing to do. There are major things happening here in Washington. This is not it. A mistake was made. Start moving forward on the next thing. That's the important thing.
I would add, though, I mean, to counter a little bit, that this is not the most important thing happening. This is some of the most sensitive and highly classified information that our leaders have access to. And if they cannot be bothered to treat this information with secrecy and responsibility, what does that mean for the rest of our information, for our tax returns, for our Social Security numbers?
In fairness, we're like 30 years into data breaches by the federal users. As a federal employee, my stuff has been hoovered up by China and every nefarious actor. It's just unfortunate. Our federal government does a very poor job of managing our information, and what we're seeing here is an amateurish mistake here. So we need to admit reality and move forward
and
here.
lead from the top and change it all the way down.
The thing is, though, that there is sensitive information. My information has been hoovered up multiple times by China as well, like you, personal and otherwise, is that there are particular laws and regulations that relate to classified information. And there are legal consequences, and we could recite the list of very prominent public officials, David Petraeus among them, right, who paid legal penalties for mishandling classified information. It's a different standard because it's a different level of risk.
Yes, but we also need to update the laws here. The Presidential Records Act did not contemplate personal computers, much less the way we use our iPhones in a very gross and egregious way in this town.
I think that is a great point because, as I was saying earlier, I mean, the Biden administration got caught up in issues of the Presidential Records Act. The Trump administration, Donald Trump, got caught up in the same sort of legal morass. And you have to begin to look at it and think maybe this law is just so difficult to follow that there could be changes to it that would make it a little bit more modern, at least.
Well, there's that, and there's the Espionage Act, right?
Yeah, and that's a separate thing. That's a separate thing.
To national security information.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second about Pete Hegseth versus Mike Waltz here, because you have seen Waltz really come in, as you noted, because he was the only reason we found out about any of this. But then it was Hegseth who went on to really make what's arguably the bigger mistake. So the reporting from our colleagues, Jim, is this, quote, many of his orders, Hegseth's orders, are verbal and based on gut instinct rather than a deliberative, multi-layered process, people familiar with his methods said. He's a TV personality, one of the sources said. A general officer makes a recommendation and he's like, yeah, go do it. The former Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin would never be like, yeah, go do it. He'd be like, we'll take it under consideration. This is all indicative of his utter inexperience, another official said. I personally, as the Capitol Hill reporter and political reporter in me can understand why they want to defend Hegseth, because that's a position that has to be confirmed by the Senate, and he barely got through, and Mike Waltz, or the National Security Advisor in general, doesn't have to deal with that. But what does this say about Hegseth in particular?
Well, listen, I don't want to say anything personal about him, but it does show you why in previous administrations, Democrat and Republican, you had quite senior level people with many years of experience at a high level. I mean, the previous occupant of that job had been a 4-star general, right, who had been through multiple years where he was quite used to the interagency process and following protocols and so on, because he understood the reasoning behind them, right? I mean, if you've commanded forces in the field, and of course Pete Hegseth did military service as well, but if you've commanded forces in the field during wartime, as someone like Lloyd Austin did, you know the consequences of risking that information.
Yeah. Now, let's, Mallory, not pretend that Lloyd Austin didn't make mistakes as defense secretary. He had his own kind of time in the barrel for things that he did. But more broadly speaking, I mean, when I spoke to Republican sources on the Hill as Hegseth was being pushed through, I mean, quite frankly, they had reservations that they were not willing to express in public because they didn't want to cross Trump. Because to Jim's point, yes, I mean, not only is it what you learn if you are a four-star general in the field, but it's also a massive, sprawling bureaucracy that deals with billions and billions of dollars.
I think that's right. And this is indicative of an attitude and part of why Trump won re-election was convincing the American people that institutions are fundamentally broken and therefore we should blow them up. So we are no longer considering whether or not people are truly qualified to be in these positions. This is indicative of an ethos that is running wild through the administration that Elon Musk has also brought in. Move fast and break things may work in tech. It may work in developing a social media app when you have other options. It does not work when you are one of the most powerful men in the entire world commanding the United States troops.
Ebola prevention, anyone? It really shows just how, I mean, President Trump has so much riding on the House passing this massive reconciliation bill that this poses basically an existential threat. What does that say about the chances Republicans have of success here?
I think they're getting smaller by the day. I mean, you just look down at the state level, the special election in Pennsylvania that was a stunning upset, a victory for Democrats in a district that Trump won handily. And the writing's on the wall. I mean, we are seeing on the ground in Michigan, people are livid about the overreach of this administration, overreading what they claim to be a mandate. And the Trump administration is now nervous about Stefanik's district, a district that he won handily. That should send a signal to the administration to maybe pull back, but instead they're barreling full force ahead and taking Stefanik down with them.
Your new book out this week is called Hate Won't Win. And I wanted to talk to you about something we're learning. We got in here at the Arena a letter that the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, sent to Gavin Newsom out in California. She wrote this to him, quote, as Secretary of Education, I'm officially asking you to form this department whether you remind schools in California to comply with federal law by protecting sex-separated spaces and activities. I'm also officially asking you to publicly assure parents that California teachers will not facilitate the fantasy of gender transitions for their children. Now, we also took this to Gavin Newsom's office. They say they're aware of the letter and they're going to look into it. What was your reaction to Gavin Newsom going, he's got this new podcast, he's hosting people like Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk, and he's saying things like this. Is it the right move for someone who clearly wants to be president in 2028?
Candidly, I don't think so. I think there is a way to step up and respond to the concerns of parents and Americans without completely changing course. That is something that people have a really sharp radar for. And it comes across as disingenuous. My mom was a homeschool mom. We know that parents and teachers and schools work best when everybody is working together, but doing a complete 180 is not going to go over well with people.